Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Alan Saunders, joined once again by Nick Farabaugh. Today, we're going to talk about the Steelers and their running back situation and how the news this week that James Conner will not be returning to the team maybe impacts their need at that position. We've been talking every weekday the month of April about the 2021 NFL Draft. Lots of topics back on the channel. We have touched on running back a little bit in the past, but we're going to go a little bit more in depth, especially with some guys that beyond the obvious names in this one. So make sure you go back through the channel, check out the old episodes, go to our coverage at Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Steelers Now. And so basically James Conner's not coming back. I wrote on the site this week that Conner had a little over 700 yards and 6 touchdowns. The 5 running backs that remain on the Steelers roster combined had a little over 700 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. So if they don't add to that room, they need the players in it to essentially double their production from a year ago, which seems like a big ask. It's sort of seems like that there's a consensus building that the Steelers are looking at running back with the first pick at number 24. Mel Kiper Jr. just changed his prediction for the Steelers to Alabama running back Najee Harris. So I guess the question for today is kind of, have the Steelers put themselves in a position where they have to draft a running back in the first round, or are there other options for them to improve their running game later in the draft?
I mean, I don't think it's a particularly great running back class, and that's something that I don't think a lot of people have talked about. I don't think it's a very good running back class. I think last year's was markedly better, at least in those mid rounds. I think you had more options deeper in the draft. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't options past round one. Obviously, there are. There are guys like Trey Sermon, like Kenneth Gainwell, like Michael Carter. I think those 3 are probably your next 3 after the obvious 3, Williams, Harris, and ETN. And I think if the Steelers end up with any of those 3 in Gainwell, Carter, or Sermon, I think they'll be just fine. Because I think all those guys can be NFL starters from day one. And I think that they can give you production in multifaceted areas. Now, Sermon's not as developed as a receiver as Carter or Gainwell, but he's also, on the other hand, much better in pass pro. And you kind of look, they're very different backs, right? I mean, Gainwell is more of an explosive type, straight line guy. Carter's more of a shifty guy, a smaller guy, but he's an ace receiver. And then Sermon's more of the typical Steelers kind of lead back type, but he's not going to have breakaway speed, but he's quick, he's explosive, he's got great footwork, and he's got soft hands for what he's at least shown. Now, do they need to get one of the top 3? It depends on kind of what the Steelers want. Because, listen, do the Steelers want a lead dog? Do they want a lead back? Or does Matt Canada want a running back by committee? So if you want a committee, you don't need a top guy like a Najee, an ETN, or Javonte Williams. Because, listen, you kind of look back into what Canada's done in colleges, at least from Northern Illinois to Wisconsin to Pitt, NC State, Maryland, all of them. He's mostly done running back by committee. Even at Pitt when he had James Conner, there was a lot more. Quadri Olison, Darren Hall, all those guys got it. Even Monty Ball at Wisconsin wasn't a complete lead guy. So Anthony McFarland wasn't either. He had Javon Leake was there as well. So, there's multiple guys that have gone to the NFL under the tutelage of Matt Canada in the backfield, and they have been running back by committee. So we'll see kind of the approach they're taking. They don't need to take one of the top 3, but, I mean, if they want to lead back, they probably will.
Yeah, that brings up something interesting I wanted to touch on here. It doesn't seem like Connor's contract with the Cardinals was out of the Steelers' range. It seems like they could have brought him back if they wanted to. So clearly, I mean, obviously he's a player that's had a lot of injury issues, but do you feel like they may be looking for someone that's a little bit different skill set wise than James Conner when they're looking to replace him in that backfield?
Yeah, I mean, well, the question more so is it Connor's skill set or is it his injury history that they kind of didn't like? Because even when Connor was playing, it always felt like he was dinged and wasn't 100%. And I think that's something that probably with Connor, I thought he was always a pretty solid football player, kind of an all-around guy, really good in pass pro. He might not have been the breakaway guy, but he could really get up those tough yards. He was quick enough. He had some burst, and he was a pretty solid receiver, I thought. But I do kind of wonder if James Conner, just through injuries and the workload he's received over his career through Pitt, through now, I do wonder if he's kind of reached his drop off point almost. We saw a little bit last year. I thought that he started to lose a little bit of his innate athleticism. Um, and I thought that maybe they should have brought him back though on that deal the Cardinals gave him. But what I think they're going to look at is they're going to look at who's going to bring, first of all, the receiving aspect back. They need a receiver out of the backfield. I mean, they missed any receiving ability out of the backfield last year, and most of the receiving ability was Connor, or it was weird dump offs to Jalen Samuels out of 5 wide sets. Like that was their receiving production essentially. They tried obviously to get Anthony McFarland involved. He just wasn't ready. So they need a receiver out of the backfield. I mean, badly. And Connor was that before last year, I think. But obviously, I think that's going to be the key. They're going to look for a guy that can be that dominant receiver. They can match up against the linebackers and win 1v1 against them, use them as a mismatch tool. And whether that's a speed guy, whether that's Najee, who's not much of a speed guy, whether that's Gainwell, whether that's Sermon, I don't think they really care because they've looked at all of them. I don't think Matt Canada really cares who it is, because I think they're definitely in play if they draft Travis Etienne, for example. It wouldn't surprise me if they went out and signed more, bruising power back after the draft. Someone like, I don't know, I'll just throw out a name, an Adrian Peterson. Obviously, he's 36, but maybe a short yardage guy like that to come in and maybe give a veteran presence, maybe compete with Balaj and Snell in that room. So that wouldn't be surprising to see that approach being taken. So I think Ken has been adaptable over his career. He's done it with all different styles of backs. Again, from Connor to Ball to McFarland, those are 3 different types of players. So I don't think they really care. I think they just want a really good receiver, and they want a guy that they can count on to be the lead dog in a committee at the very least in that backfield.
Yeah, I think that you touched on the pass protection. I think that's a big part of it too. That's something a lot of rookie running backs are not particularly good at. I think something that McFarland struggled with last year, and obviously, this year they're going to be playing with Ben Roethlisberger, who's not that mobile, who they clearly have a desire to protect. They're not going to want to give a guy a ton of snaps if he can't pass protect to the ability that he's going to keep Ben Roethlisberger safe. If you have a rookie running back that's getting your Hall of Fame quarterback killed, he's not going to be playing very much. And so when we take that, they need pass catching ability. That player needs to have pass protection ability. And, obviously that, they don't want to completely duplicate their skill sets elsewhere. Which of these guys out after Williams, after Etienne and Harris seems to fit the Steelers the best in your opinion?
I mean, if we look historically at who would fit them the best, it's unquestionably Trey Sermon. I mean, he's a Steelers back more so than a Gainwell or a certainly a Michael Carter. I think Michael Carter would be a complete deviation from everything that they usually drafted. Now, Anthony McFarland was a pretty big deviation from what they've drafted, so that's not out of the question that they would go Gainwell or Carter, because again, they sent Eddie Faulkner to North Carolina Pro Day. They sent Phil Kryler, their college scouting director, to Memphis Pro Day, obviously to see the running backs. So, I mean, there's clear interest in those guys. But Sermon, he's a bigger guy. He's stockier. He's more compact. He's a guy that, while maybe not he's a traditional power back, he's definitely a guy that's shown the ability to drop the shoulder, be tough, and gain some tough yards. And I think he's that guy where, he's more polished in pass pro than most of the guys in after a tier 1. And you kind of look at that. Again, he's maybe not as polished as a receiver, but the Steelers have had confidence in the past that they can develop those guys into decent receivers. So Sermon would follow the trend of history for the Steelers. I think he's the most Steelers back. Also, a name I'll bring up, Ramondre Stevenson from Oklahoma, is definitely a Steelers back. He's about 5'11". I think he was 230 at the Senior Bowl, something around there. Brought it down to, I think, 220 at his pro day. But which is good for him. I think he needed that He again not great long speed, but he's got pretty sweet feet for his size. He's just a better athlete than most guys coming out at his size, and he's really pretty solid in pass pro as well because he just is so big. So those are your Steelers backs, but obviously there could definitely be historical deviations. We've seen that in the past few years with the Steelers.
Yeah, there's other guys, in that range after the first group. Chuba Hubbard, which would be a pretty big deviation from what the Steelers generally like, but not that different of a player from McFarland, who they already have. I don't know if that helps or hurts his cause because he is so similar to what they already have, but maybe it does show that they would be interested in a player like that. The other sort of big elephant in the room for me is I think the idea that the Steelers are going into this offseason with the impetus to fix the running game is real. I believe when Art Rooney and Kevin Colbert say that their number one priority this offseason is to fix the running game, I believe it. But I don't think that means taking a running back in the first round because I don't think their offensive line was very good last year. And that is a big part of running success. I also don't think their running scheme was particularly good last year either. I think that's one of the reasons they went to Matt Canada, who's most of the Canada things we saw in the offense are built for the running game, the jet sweep inside zone combo and things like that. And so can they fix this running game even if they don't get a top back by fixing the offensive line and doing other things?
Yeah, I mean, right. So I think they could, right? First of all, the scheme factor was huge last year. And I mean, part of that was probably the fact that they didn't have any downfield passing game because teams just cheated up on them. And that's going to have to come through Ben more so than anyone, obviously. So he has a role in this as well. Ben can open up the offense with his arm. Maybe an off season, of working out and maybe getting healthy. Maybe Ben can gain a little bit more mobility back. That would be nice. You never know. So maybe there's that added threat. But I think that's kind of the point. While the running back room is probably the worst running back room in the league, when you look back last year, were they really the problem? Like, what did you ever watch that Steelers team and say, "Oh yeah, their running game is bad because of their running backs"? Like, I mean, I thought they were a part of it, but I didn't think they were the number one priority. And that's kind of been my thing. I mean, what are you going to do if Najee Harris can't run behind anyone because the blocking still sucks? And I thought that was obviously the biggest thing last year. They didn't get any push up front. James Conner had no holes to run through. Anthony McFarland, I think, well, he looked awful. I thought he could have looked a lot better if he had some decent holes to run through. I mean, listen, he would have had to move mountains to even get holes at times. So the O-line has to be a very big part, and so does tight end, because remember, they just lost Vance McDonald, who was their best blocking tight end.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces to this. Running back is one of them, certainly, especially now with Connor gone. They need a running back. They probably need a running back that's better than the other running backs they have. I think they can get that maybe even into the third or fourth round. I don't think it has to be a first round pick to make an upgrade on the group they have. And I think those offensive line problems, the scheme problems, those were the bigger issues with the Steelers running game in the past than who was running the ball. I'm not sure if you get, a Najee Harris or a Travis Etienne, that they're going to have room to run, that they're going to have the scheme to run, as much as they want to. So we'll keep an eye on this, but I think pretty definitively that there's no need for the Steelers. They don't feel like they shouldn't feel like they have to draft a running back in the first round.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but I think they maybe feel that's where the value is, I guess, because listen, they're showing tons of love to Etienne and Najee Harris, and then they are sending their Eddie Faulkner around the block, and then they're sending, they're sending their big guns, if you will, like Phil Kreidler and other guys to running back pro days, like down the list, and then they were at Trey Sermon's pro day, like. So, they've seen all the running backs up close and personal. And I think that's something that they really are definitely looking at. If they think that a guy could potentially be a lead back, and I think that goes from, I think they're going to end up with one of the top six. I'll say that. I think they're going to end up with one of the top six. And that being Gainwell, Sermon, Carter, Williams, Harris, ETN. Because I think they feel that's where perhaps they can open up the offense a little bit. At least also not just on the ground, but in the passing game. I think they think that maybe a Najee and ETN, someone that can do the receiving skill set that they didn't have last year, can also help out Ben and the receivers, out there as well.
Yeah, for sure. Good stuff, Nick. And we're going to wrap things up there. So thanks again for watching another episode of Draft Talk here at Pittsburgh Sports Live. And of course, check out all the coverage at SteelersNow.com. We're going to continue this every day leading up to the 2021 NFL Draft. So make sure to subscribe, like the channel, and press the bell for notifications so you find out every time we've got a new show about the Steelers, about the draft, about anything else for that matter. Really appreciate you guys watching. For Nick Farabaugh, I'm Alan Saunders. Enjoy the rest of your day.